So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about a new tech I found, and I gotta say, this tech is incredibly mid, and probably isn't going to be that useful that often. So, here's an assumption I'm just going to make. If my opponent plays, we're going to assume 3 copies of Effect Veiler, and then 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. That means they have about a 50% chance to open either Imperm or Veiler, which will if I were to normal summon Girsu, everyone should know that Girsu has 2 effects. So if you have at the very least Imperm, you're always going to Imperm Girsu because Girsu is going to prevent you from being able to Imperm later. So you might as well deal with the Foolish Burial effect and also the Summon Token effect. So you might as well do this. So in that regard, the tech, not actually that useful, like just in general, I don't think. But it exists and it's worth talking about just because of that. So, all right. So the main thing that we're going to be starting off with will probably be Girsu, but there are technically different ways we could maybe accomplish this. But we're going to let's say we start with normal summon Girsu, right? And then we're going to activate the effect of Girsu to send a orcust card. So in this case, it's usually going to be either Harp Horror or Nightmare, both of which are fairly same, you know, not that different. The end result is the same, but okay. Wait, actually, I think you're supposed to send Harp first, so you can then summon Nightmare, and then Nightmare Foolish Burials like World Wand, but even if not, you can technically like send Symbol Skeleton or something off of the Nightmare, and it ends up like pretty similar. So yeah. Anyway, so after Girsu normal summon and Girsu activate effect to special summon the token, this actually opens up a new possibility for you. So maybe before you didn't actually have a line to play around Nibiru, but now with Dominus Impulse, we could technically run 3 copies of Impulse, and because we're specifically using Girsu here to give our opponent a token. If this resolves and we get hand trapped, like maybe we get ashed on the Foolish Burial part or something like that, then we also have the option to technically thrust to search Impulse. And this might seem like a question mark moment, like, why would you want to do this? And the reason is pretty simple. So it's going to require your deck to run no Light Earth or Wind monsters, which I think is like kind of doable, but it's not necessarily the best in every meta. Like not being able to play Droll kind of sucks, right? Or like Effect Veiler, Gamma, whatever, right? So that sucks, but aside from that, the effect of Dominus Impulse states, if your opponent controls a card, you can activate this card from your hand, and then when a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster or monsters negate that effect, then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. So the second part isn't as relevant. I mean, it would be nice if you could also fulfill that condition, which, you know, would be nice if it happens. But as essentially what this has allowed us to do with our copies of Thrust and Impulse is, well, let's assume our opponent is running 3 copies of Nibiru. So maybe before in our engine, we had absolutely no way to deal with Nibiru, but now we could do like triple tactics thrust for talents, or we could do triple tactics for Impulse. And if we were to specifically add Impulse, Impulse deals with Bestials. So if you were to try to summon a Bestial, we can just negate that. But of course, a Bestial on the next turn could still be annoying. So maybe being able to destroy would be really nice with Impulse if we could manage to do so. Regardless, it's the thing we're mostly worried about here in this case will be Nib. So if we were to activate Impulse, we could just do that, right? So with Thrust, with this Orcust example in particular, this requires our opponent to still take an action. This does not, right? So now we have a 30% chance to just be able to play around Nib. And even if not, this is still an interruption from our hand that happened to somewhat allow us to play around and deal with Nibiru a little bit. And a deck I can think of that can utilize this without too much issue would be like Blackwing, for example. But the primary issue with if we were to do this with Blackwing instead is that we can't really consistently early on give our opponent a body or some kind of card for our opponent to control in order to prevent Nibiru from being activatable. So Nibiru does not require you to control or not control anything. So your board could be completely empty. Therefore, if we were to be playing Impulse for the reason of Nibiru, assuming we are going first, our opponent might control nothing, right? So that's what we would be assuming of like a Blackwing. And then we just get nibbed, and Impulse is just simply a hand trap for next turn, which is still not the worst thing, but it's much better in this case, and this would be kind of a niche scenario where it's very useful. So the moment Impulse becomes live is on summon 2, 3, or something like that, because technically Yursu summons 2 tokens, but since it's like the second summon overall, this is going to be activatable like immediately. So if we were to deal with Vistuals or something like that, this could be somewhat useful. Vistuals, or what's it called? The Ashen Dragon. Vados. Yeah, Vados, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction. We could technically play around that with the Impulse. We could also deal with the Nib, but yeah, this also limits the hand traps you can play and some cards you can potentially put on your inboard, but playing a mostly dark strategy wouldn't be that problematic in general, so it wouldn't be like literally the worst thing in the world. It would be pretty okay in my book. So that's a usage we could have with Impulse, and this is a lot better than I guess Purge in that sense, because Purge, if we were to do the same thing, it's kind of pointless, right? So if we were to say we want to purge, let's assume Max E, right? You can't purge Max E because they would just simply chain to the Girsu special summoning of the tokens, and then it's already resolved by the time you would be wanting to activate Purge. So this similar type of play of giving your opponent a body to negate some kind of hand trap or something, just not doable with Purge, which honestly just makes Purge look like a bit of a worse card, in my opinion. But I don't know. Nibiru isn't that big of a deal nowadays because a lot of decks just have different ways to play and, well, play around and deal with Nibiru. Just for example, with like a Centurion, you can just special summon like 4 times and call it a day. Well, not if you use the new support, you special summon more, which isn't like necessarily a good or bad thing because you also get some draws and stuff. So it just, I guess, doesn't play around, I guess, Typhon anymore, which is kind of bad situationally. But yeah. Let's see what else we got here. So aside from Orcust, nothing really comes to mind that would be able to play around like Nib with the Impulse. And the play of just doing Dumbness Impulse plus Girsu, like there's no problem with this because even if our opponent does not have Nib, technically we're still fine, right? Because if our opponent does have Nibiru, then we can stop the Nibiru, and it allows us to play more, I guess, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like make the best play we possibly can, because sometimes you sequence like in a suboptimal way. Like for the end board, you might be better off sequencing certain cards in a certain way, but if you do, it will play into certain hand traps, and you lose maybe like one interaction or something in the future. It essentially weakens your end board or affects you negatively in some kind of way. But if your opponent did have the thing that you were worried about, then you would just get railed by whatever that thing would be. So maybe it's like Ash Blossom Joe Spring. Maybe it's like Infinite Impermanence. Or maybe you really need a certain effect to resolve, so you throw out an effect that would have been more optimally used later. So stuff like that. But alright. Dominus Impulse, surprisingly enough, it can be utilized for some different things. And now that I'm looking at it, the effects of light monsters, if I'm playing this, that means I can't resolve Lubellion. Huh. Like, if I am playing Bestials, this wouldn't be like necessarily that great. I mean, I would still be able to use Lubellion's inherent summon effect, which is something. So there is like a price on this card, I suppose, but it does have some like versatility with things. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.